Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. Today's video is brought to you by Predictable Revenue's Service LinkedIn Outbound. Find out how we can leverage and grow your existing LinkedIn network to book meetings into your calendar at the link below. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Collin Stewart, and today I'm joined by the head of enablement at Seismic, Irina Soriano. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
The most number of takes I've done to get that intro right in a long time, mostly centering around pronunciation. That's totally on me. I'm really excited to have you on the show today. We are talking about becoming mission critical now and how to build an enablement team and basically prove that you're mission critical.
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit about how you create an enablement team. We're going to talk about charter, and then we're going to get into the math and some of the details around how do I actually prove the return on investment on all this enablement work. So I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So when you think about enablement, we're not just talking about sales enablement, we're talking about a broad spectrum. So talk to me about your definition of enablement.
Mm-hmm. So I always look at this as if I had to explain this to my grandma, right? So in very simple terms, I would say that we're responsible to make sure that our sellers, and for us at Seismic, our entire go-to-market team, have what they need at the right point in time to be rock stars at what they do. So to be more specific, that relates to sales enablement or enablement in general. At Seismic, we take a broader enablement approach for marketing, customer success, channel partners, and sales. And we are really responsible for building fundamental enablement services that are repeatable and that are ongoing and that are scalable, such as your onboarding programs, your skill-based continuous development, promotion-specific training, and that what goes with us, as well as all our ad hoc situational enablement that we provide during any time of change. So if we have a new product launch, or if there's a new competitive move, or we're entering a new market. So that's really one bucket. The second piece too is that we are designing, developing, implementing, and also evaluating any sort of process. So that could be as simple as your sales process or a new methodology that we're introducing. Thirdly, we're also taking care of the fact that our sellers and our go-to-market teams are able to tell the most compelling stories to our customers and to our prospect. And we do that by ensuring that they have the right effective content that they need at their fingertips at the right point in time. And then lastly, we also manage our internal enablement tech stack, very important responsibility that we have. So at its source, we obviously manage Seismic, right? Because that's our own product, our storytelling and sales enablement platform, plus any e-learning tools, coaching tools, onboarding tools, everything really that the go-to-market teams use. So in a nutshell, those are really the four big things that we're taking care of. So we're really a revenue driver for the organization, and we impact many, many things that help to grow revenue for the company in general.
Beautiful. I like that it's not just the content side of things. You've got the whole tech stack as well?
So every piece of technology that gets used by our go-to-market team. So that doesn't mean, I give you an example. So if we talk CRM, for example, that's something that our operations team is handling, right? So we might be involved in enablement for, the CRM that we're using, of course, but we wouldn't manage the back end of it. So the tech stack that we really own, those are the tools that we are admins for, that we're using internally, and that we're providing content through, that we're using to do trainings and learnings and coachings and all of those fun things. So those are really the things we really truly own as part of our tech stack.
Gotcha. So it's your own tech stack. It's not necessarily the sales operations, the CRM, the outreach, sales loft kind of tech.
Correct. So some of them are overlapping, and I think it depends on the organization, right? So, for example, we own Sales Navigator as well as a social tool. We own our prospecting tool as well and drive most of the enablement. So I think it comes a little bit down to what you decide in collaboration with the operations team that you work with and some of the other functions in the company as well. So
cool. Okay. And so let's say I'm either in an enablement role for the first time, or I'm the only person. Where do I start?
Yep. That's a good question because, probably most of the people in this field have either been, already just by themselves in the role or they're currently by themselves. So I would always say that especially if you have, no experience walking into this, which is also happening to a lot of folks, don't do this without having a plan, right? So make sure you build your enablement charter, which could really be the plan. And I can dive into some of the components for me that really flow within the charter, which might be a little bit more comprehensive than just a classic charter would look like. So where I would start, and that's just mission critical for any charter, for any plan that you built, is just coming up with overall objectives. So at Seismic, we're using OKRs, which means objectives and key results. Now, the organization might not necessarily use OKRs. That's absolutely fine. Then you can just pick, 3 to 4 overall objectives. Where really do you want to go, in the next year, like in the next couple of years, like long-term, really something that's inspiring to you. And then also, where do you want to go this coming quarter, right? What do you want to do? And then pick specific key results that are measurable outcomes that are related to those objectives so that you're able to track ROI as well. So ideally, you want to use an increase-decrease approach here, meaning you focus on increasing or decreasing a number, a percentage, a dollar amount, a number of days, for example, if you talk about RAM. And that's really the starting point. And then aligned to that, I would also suggest that you set up just a plan on a page, which really shows, hey, week to week, what do I need to get done? Like, what are some of the things that I have to tackle in order to not just hit my key results, but also hit my objectives? So normally I would recommend to spend about 3 hours probably at the beginning of the quarter to review what you did last quarter and then also plan for the coming quarter. If you have a team, it probably take you a little bit longer. Like we at Seismic, we grab a couple of half days to really map all of this out together as a team. And really what this does is that you make sure you're not becoming the fire department in your organization, right? You mentioned it earlier, become mission critical and become strategic. You have to build some strategy around that. Few other pieces that kind of flow into this as well. So, you want to make sure that you build out a roadmap just for your enablement fundamentals, right? What are the programs that you built that are mission critical that you just need to offer to your go-to-market team in order to be successful, such as your onboarding, for example. And then also what investments are you making in situational enablement, right? So how quickly can you be ready to turn around enablement efforts when something happens? We have a new product, or my competitor made a move, or I'm entering a new market, or something happens, right? Some kind of area of change. And then obviously another couple of pieces is just setting up, a strong collaboration with other business partners across the organization, have a communication cadence. You might want to think about having an advocate or a champions team in place as well that can provide you feedback as you build out some of your roadmap. And then lastly, just having an overall communication cadence with the entire company. Because if you don't talk about what you're doing and nobody knows, it's a little bit tough to get a seat on the table, and also making sure that people understand the responsibilities and what you're currently working on, right? So again, kind of protecting yourself a little bit from just being the fire department. So in a nutshell, very highly speaking, that's probably why I would start.
Gotcha. And so I'm curious, where in the overall organization, where does enablement typically sit? Is it under operations, under sales? Is it at the C-level?
Yeah, I mean, C-level, that would be great. I haven't heard of that as of yet. So the hopes are one day that's going to happen. I've seen it done many different ways. Either that we can sit under operations. I see it actually more and more now that we might sit in the marketing group as well. We could be tucked under sales. Like I would say those are probably the 3 places where I would recommend to set up your enablement. If you do so from scratch. So you really want to make sure it's connected to the business. And there's pros and cons sitting in either, right? So if you sit under operations, you have access to a lot of data. That's wonderful. We need data to show ROI, right? So that's great. And if you sit under sales, sales often has a lot of budget too, right? So it's good to have access to that as well. If you can sit in both, I would say best of both worlds. But, it might also an opportunity if you want to drive very close marketing collaboration to sit in that group. but for us so we're part of the operations group, but we work super, super close with our marketing department. I mean, we have amazing relationship, which is very critical to our success as well. So, it really depends on what you're trying to build and where you want to take this. So there's definitely options for that.
And so talk to me a little bit about, so I love that it's a little bit flexible, and it's obviously going to vary depending on the organization and the size and the shape and objectives. I'm curious about the charter. So talk to me a little bit about, we talked about how you're sort of planning out the roadmap on a quarterly basis alongside your OKRs. It seems like the charter is something that's got to come first. So, and the charter basically pulls you out and is something that you can stick to when people are trying to push you into firefighting mode.
Yeah, you got it. It.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So, I mean, it's really having, and it's, if you call it a charter or you call it a plan or you call it your strategy, right? That on the side, it's about just doing it and having a starting point here. So there's really two pieces to this, right? So number one, you want to show that you have an impact on the organization. If you're firefighting all year, you won't be able to show anything at the end of the year, right? So that could potentially be a problem. And then the second piece is, if you want to set up or really build an enablement ecosystem in your organization, that can only happen with a plan and with a strategic approach and a communication cadence across the organization. So, in regards to the first point that I brought up, so showing that you actually providing ROI and that everything that we do has a big impact on the organization, that helps us as well. If you're by yourself, you might want to ask for headcount at one point. So if this was me and you came to me, my first question would be, what's justifying that we're making more investment in enablement? So you would have to be able to show that there's ROI to some of the things that we've done. And then the second piece is really when you think about like an enablement ecosystem, like we are the connector point in the company. Like we have to make sure that there's, information, feedback, messaging, content freely flowing across different business units to best support the go-to-market teams. And that's what you do when you want to move away from enablement just being like a program or a function, right? Ultimately want to move towards building an enablement ecosystem. Like that's always my goal. Like I see us as the connector in the company rather than just, we're like a department, So I always try to stay away from using names like that. That's not the ultimate goal for us at Seismic.
That's fair. And I imagine that sort of fits into like how you document and communicate the strategy to the rest of the team. And that's sort of like the first part of your charter.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a very open communication schedule. So especially when we get together for the first time and we really united the team and brought the team together. I joined Seismic at the end of last year. So this was really one of my first things. And we sat down and we built the charter out as a team. Like the communication was very clear, right? We sat with our executive enablement board to run through the charter, to gather feedback, to make sure, hey, we're aligned with the organization, we're aligned to organizational objectives and goals. And then we took it a level down, right? Then we had set up calls with our go-to-market leaders to run them through the charter and really explain, hey, this is what we do and this is how it's going to be defined moving forward. And then afterwards, we took it to the rest of the company, right? And then last step was just to hop on the, a company all hands and really talking about, hey, now these are some of the changes that were made, and this is how we're moving forward. So like I said, is you can do the most wonderful things. If you're not telling anybody about it, it means nothing, right? It's just a piece of paper and it's not going to come to life. So, you need to write it down, but there's action that need to follow, kind of supporting the charter, right? And I think it's like the North Star for us that we follow. And, we update this every quarter. Obviously, our OKRs change every quarter. If there's tweaks to like the operations OKRs or the company OKRs, we go in and we tweak those as well. So, it's a living and breathing document. It's not, I write it once and never touch it again. So it's an ongoing effort, really.
Interesting. Okay. And so basically you've got the strategy and mission that are that's the guiding sort of principles in the North Star. And then there's the responsibilities of like, you're documenting the area of responsibility. These are all the things that we are accountable for.
Yeah. Correct. And that's, again, and we know how this goes. Sometimes things come our way and we're like, okay, it's not on the plan, but we got to tackle it. So we always leave a 20% wiggle room, right? We know each quarter there's going to be 20% we just have to pick up because it's important and nobody knew it's going to come our way, a few weeks prior. So that's usually kind of the way to go with this. Like you want to give yourself some space to pick up some of the things that matter, but that you weren't planning for prior.
Gotcha. Perfect. Okay. And so this is, and so the last kind of part of the charter is basically the roadmap of here's what we've decided to do this quarter. And then you've left 20% for firefighting.
Yep. And we have an overall idea where we want to get to until the end of the year, right? What are some of the fundamental programs? So really lately, the basic enablement services that we want to build out, be it around like continuous skill development. We're currently re-ramping some of our onboarding and adding some additional pieces. Again, those programs, they live and breathe, right? They change, they get bigger, we adapt them, we make things better, we gather feedback. Like there's like a whole loop behind that. And then there's a couple of other components that we want to have in place before the year's over, but really getting granular, that's, what we're focused on each quarter, right? So that's very important. So every week when we meet, like we know exactly, hey, where we're going next week, like what do we need to get done? How are we working as a team? Our team is broken down in a certain way. So everybody knows exactly what they are responsible for and what they're working on. And that's working really well. It's a great team. So I'm very lucky to have them.
That's awesome. It's always one of those things when you inherit part of a team that you didn't get to build yourself. There's always that risk of like, are they going to be as awesome as a team I would have built myself? Yeah. So you're very fortunate.
They are pretty awesome, I have to say. So really, really good crew. Very, very committed, very passionate, very hardworking. Just all the things you can't teach. So it's really great.
Oh, that's beautiful. So if we transition a bit out of, talking about the charter, which is basically keeping you out of firefighting mode, which from what I've seen is the easiest mode to be in, especially sitting in the sales enablement seat is like, oh, we're missing this, we're missing that. This is a priority. You're coming from the rev team. They're like, hey, things are on fire. We need this ASAP. Mm-hmm. And so to kind of pull yourself out and say, listen, if we are going to take on something extra, something else is going to drop, or we're going to slot it into that 20% time. I think that's a really great strategy. I'm curious on the return on investment side, right? We want to talk about how you become mission critical. And I think the first part of that is attaching the value of the training. I'm curious how you're able to sort of attach the value when we're talking specifically about, training programs or, education or content.
It's always the toughest thing, right? So taking a couple of steps back. So, obviously we're not a revenue generator, right? We don't sell product. We're not producing revenue ourselves, but we're a revenue driver for sure. So we drive and impact a whole range of different things that are ultimately impacting revenue generation and growth, right? So that's important to understand. Like we're not a cost center in the organization. Like we're actually having an impact. So we know that's the case. Now it just comes down to how are we going to show that that's the case. So, like you said, there's always the trap of the fire department, which holds you away from that. But really using the charter and using the objectives and having tangible KRs puts you in a good, right in a good spot to measure, right? Anything that is, like I said earlier, if you look at it, like the best strategy to probably do that is to think about it as what are we increasing and what are we decreasing, right? So it could be either or, and then attached either to, a dollar amount, right? Or, days. So maybe we might be reducing ramp time for a sales rep, or we might be looking at increasing or decreasing a percentage. So it could be attrition or retention, like, especially in the startup world, those are things that matter a lot, right? If you only have a small sales force and you have a very, very long ramp time and you have high attrition, that can be very costly for the business as well, right? So those are, depending on what type of business that you sit in, there's different things to look at. So it really depends on the initiative or on the project or on the service that you offer. So our KRs and what we measure changes completely from one to the next, right? So every quarter we might be measuring and looking at different things. Some of the things are more short-term. Some of the things are a little bit more long-term as well, right? So I give you like some other examples. So you could be looking at, say, pipeline goals, right? Or general quota attainment, or are they hitting their quota, within the ramp time that you have decided, or the first year that they with you. Ramp time in general is great. So cutting down ramp time or cutting down the days to ramp is something very important. Any satisfaction scores, of course, if you roll out training or you do ad hoc enablement, like situational enablement, then you could also look at tech stack adoption and usage, right? So how's the technology is expensive. For we want to make sure people are using it the right way. Is it adopted the right way? We could look at productivity, overall activity, KPI achievement. So the options are really endless, and it really comes down to what you're working on that particular quarter. So if you find yourself saying, hey, my objective is we're launching training ABC next quarter, then I would say you putting yourself not in the best position, possibly. So you want to make sure, executives listen when you start talking in numbers as well, right? And the decrease, increase approach, or the from and to approach is usually a good way to do that. And you can start very simple, put a couple of trackers in place that you regularly check out. But those are just some of the examples. If somebody starts from scratch, hopefully there's something useful there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm curious on, because like enablement in nature is taking on such a wide part of the organization. I'm curious, how do you prioritize? Like there must always be, maybe not 100 fires, but there must always be, covering sales, marketing, customer success, all these different disciplines. There must be 1,000 different projects you could work on. How do you prioritize and make sure that the one that you're working on this quarter is going to have the highest impact? Yeah,
we interview. So we start interviewing on exec level to find out priorities for the quarter. And obviously, our organization uses OKRs, like I said, so we know what everybody's priorities are, right? Because everybody has access to their OKRs, which is great. It's a very, very transparent way of creating alignment. So it starts really there. And then we go to the first, top level of leadership across the go-to-market suite. And then, literally go to, hey, what are the biggest fires that we need to tackle, right? Where's the biggest need in regards to especially setting up just repeatable enablement services, but then also an ad hoc situational enablement need, right? So we ask the question, we look for trends, and then we prioritize based on that. And then obviously when everybody gets into OKR mode at the end of the quarter, then we're making sure that whatever we're building out, the objectives that we're having are aligned to, for us, it's really the sales objectives, the operations objectives, the company objectives. And then we're picking our priorities based on some of the trends that we heard across the organization. So it doesn't mean that when we ask, everybody gets everything they ever bring up. Of course not. But this also helps us to have a look at, hey, what might we tackle next quarter, right? And then, ultimately we run trainings, we facilitate, we sit in sessions, we get very quickly an idea what some of the big gaps are as well, right? So I would say it's a little bit of both, like observation from our end, but like literally going and driving a full business analysis every quarter to find out what's needed, so that we can make sure people have been heard as well, right? And we're not just dictating where we're going, but we're really, we have a very inclusive approach when we pick priorities. And also when we're building out programs, just having our enablement advocate team that really gives us super valuable input into any new initiatives or projects that we're having. That is something really valuable to have a group of people that is, working with you on these things. Just it's very helpful when you get to roll out state as well, to have some folks, some the buy-in from some folks already. So.
And I guess, are those formal teams, informal teams, just people that you tend to go to? Like, talk to me about how you assemble them. bring
Yep.
those?
So we made sure. So usually when call it a champions team, or we call it an enablement advocate team, like either or. Normally, I would recommend that you have folks in there that sit obviously across each of the business teams that you're supporting. Right. If you want to do sales, I would only pick people from the sales team. For us, it goes all the way from marketing to the partner team, and we have people in there with different tenure as well. So we look at that. We have the rock star folks in there, like really the people that are doing really, really well in their roles. Some of them have been for a long time with the company. Some of them have been, a relatively short period of time with the company, but really the folks that have been standing out and that got nominated by leadership to come into this group. And we have a Slack channel where we're talking, right? We have regular communication. We have a call that we set up once a quarter where we get together to really make sure they understand what we're working on. And then ultimately, depending on, what comes up, what project initiative we're working on a particular quarter, we pull in different folks for input. And that has been really, really great, right? And also it allows us to just gather early success stories when we're doing something new. And those guys are obviously always willing to share and kind of spread the word across the organization. So I always felt like in my few years around the block that I've been doing this, especially when we had big rollouts, having people from the field involved to really make sure we hear their opinion and we make it applicable to them. To me, that's invaluable. I think that's really, really important. So if that's not something that anybody has in their company yet, and you could be a team of enablers, or it could just be you, especially if it's only you, it's almost like your extended team in the field, right? You definitely want to have some champions that support your efforts if you're the only practitioner.
Gotcha. Yeah, I imagine it'd be very challenging to actually get anything rolled out if you're just a team of one and you don't have any additional support.
No, like I said, if you think about enablement from the perspective of an ecosystem, right? And I've been in the position where I was only enabler, same thing, through getting all the plates spinning at the same time. It's a lot, but it's, once you start really building an ecosystem, you start to have allies as well, right? You need to drive very, very close partnerships. You need to work in sync with a lot of people, with your marketing team, with your product marketing team. If those relationships are not good, this is going to be a very lonely life, especially if you're by yourself. And people that I hire into the job, I always make sure they have so first of all, a great communication. I know they're strong influencers. We have to do so much influencing in this role, and they are connectors. I can tell they can connect people. They can work through conflict, they can work through difficulty, they can put themselves in other people's shoes. So that whole empathy piece here comes into play as well. Those are soft skills that matter so much in this role. If that's naturally not something that you're good at, the job's probably not for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's so critical because you're effectively, teaching everybody how to do their role.
Yes.
It's such an in some ways, it's obvious that you the enablement side shouldn't have to prove its worth, because if it wasn't there, you'd have all these people running around that didn't know how to do their jobs. But at the same time, you need to be able to sort of quantify it so that we can say, hey, we want to expand and get more budget. And you're right, the C-level does like to talk in sort of numbers and impact and percentages and dollars.
Yep.
And so just, I feel like I don't want to keep you on the podcast forever. I know we both have other commitments coming up, but just, want to and we'll get to the cold call in a sec, but just one last piece to sum it up. If we have somebody listening and, or if a listener is newly in an enablement role, or they're the only person and they're trying to drive more of an impact with the organization. And in order to do that, they need to get more funding or more resources from the C-level. What's your advice on the best way to approach that?
I would, and that's just me, if you're by yourself, I would probably make sure, if you don't already know, to find your champion in the organization. And that's not the buddy sitting next to you, but that's ideally somebody who should be sitting in the C-suite. So who first of all understands enablement, and that could be people that have been in organizations that already had enablement set up in a proper way, right? So that had a positive experience with it in the past, and really somebody just who has your back, when you want to push certain things through and make a change and drive a new initiative. That would be the starting point for me. Like, you need a good ally, right? Somebody really who gets what you do and who understands, what your responsibilities are and what you're trying to build. That'd be the first step.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Irina, thank you so much for coming on. Before we wrap, I'm picking up my imaginary phone and we'll do the our very favorite cold call segment.
Okay. I haven't done a cold call in like 10 years. So, if it's terrible, don't be so hard on me.
For sure. 100% will be easy. So before we jump in, who are you? What's the audience that you're cold calling into? Who's your target buyer?
It's almost like we can flip, right? So if I'm just going to be, a sales rep at Seismic, and you can be the head of enablement at company ABC, the technology company, or you can technically be me.
Okay, perfect. I'll be the head of enablement at company ABC. We're going to do ring ring. I'll say hello, and then we'll go from there.
Sure.
Sound fun?
Good. Let's go.
All right. Ring ring. Hey, this is Collin.
Hi, good afternoon, Collin. This is Irina Soriano with Seismic. I hope I'm catching you at a good time. Reason for my call is that your former colleague, John Smith, that you worked with at company XYZ, actually pointed me in your direction. Does his name ring a bell?
Yeah, I remember John fondly.
Oh, great. So, I actually met with him last week because his team has just implemented Seismic, our sales enablement solution, to kickstart their sales marketing and enablement efforts. And he mentioned to me that you're planning to do the same thing. So he encouraged me to reach out, and I was hoping to grab a couple of minutes of your time to set up a meeting with you.
It sounds interesting, but I'm not quite sure what you guys do. We have some key thrusts that we're working on this quarter around creating content for our team. How would you fit in there?
Great. So I'm assuming you might have not heard of Seismic before. So we are a storytelling and sales enablement platform. And I know John mentioned to me that you're just in the midst of setting up an enablement team as well at your own company. So we would pretty much be the baseline of your tech stack, right? So we make sure that your sellers have the right content at the right point in time at their fingertips to be able to tell compelling stories to their prospects and their customers. And we've been doing this for a very long time, and we do this very well. I would love to be able to speak to you a little bit more, understand a few more of your challenges that you currently might be having in this department, especially as you're currently working on content. So I was hoping to find 30 minutes of your time next week to run you through that. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Like?
Sounds great.
Good.
Irina, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been awesome. That was pretty good for having not done a cold call in 10 years.
It's literally, I've listened to a lot, but no, actually that's not true. I have been doing cold calls about a couple of years ago. I was hopping on the phone call with Salesforce and made cold calls. So it's not even true. Good. I'm glad it wasn't a disaster. Otherwise, that wouldn't have looked very good on me. So
it was great.
Good news.
If people have questions about the episode, about how to implement a charter or why, or how to sort of build their objectives or key results around the enablement function, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
LinkedIn is great. So just looking up Irina Soriano at Seismic. I'm the only one, so it should be very easy to find. I'm very happy to give advice and coaching and mentorship. So if you reach out to me, you will hear back.
Right on. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thanks everybody. We'll see you all next week. All right. Shout out to Predictable Revenues, Service LinkedIn Outbound, Service for sponsoring this video. As a founder and sales leader myself, I know most of the best practices in terms of like what I need to be doing on LinkedIn, but sometimes I just don't have the time. What the right things to do are, but it comes down to a trade-off of where's my time better spent? And can I find somebody to click around on LinkedIn for me and book meetings, and then I can focus on higher level activities. And so think about it. What's the best use of your time? If you're a founder, sales leader, and you have a team, you need some meetings, I'd encourage you to check it out. I'm using it myself. I'm obviously the founder, so eating our own dog food. But if you're curious, click the link below to learn more.